It was the scream that tipped me off one of those high-pitched, theatrical shrieks that echoed down the entire block like a smoke alarm going off in a porcelain doll shop. I dropped my garden gloves, stood up from the raised bed, and peeked over the top of my brand-new cedar fence. And there she was, Karen, in full meltdown mode, standing in my yard, waving her arms like she was landing a helicopter. Except she wasn't lost. She was furious. And inside the property she'd spent months declaring wasn't mine. "You can't build this. It's against HOA regulations. This is unauthorized construction and a visual hazard. Never mind that the fence sat fully within my land, 100% approved by the city and stamped by the zoning office. I had the permits posted right on the inside of the gate. But Karen wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in control. She was the self-appointed president of our HOA's Aesthetic Harmony Committee, a title that gave her less power than a parking meter, but one she wielded like a royal decree. "This is your final warning, Alex," she barked, pointing a chubby, trembling finger at my chest as I approached. "Tear it down or I'll have the city send bulldozers." I folded my arms, staying calm even as the heat rose behind my ears. "Karen, you're trespassing." She actually laughed. "You can't trespass on common grounds." "This isn't common ground," I said, pointing to the iron survey pin a few feet from her clunky sandals. "That pin right there marks the legal boundary. You're 2 feet over it. You're in violation, not me." But she didn't budge. If anything, she doubled down, whipped out her phone and dialed 911 right in front of me. "Yes. I'd like to report a homeowner for illegal fencing and threatening behavior." She looked me straight in the eye and said loud enough for dispatch to hear, "He's becoming aggressive." That's when I knew I had to act carefully, but decisively. Because here's the thing. I'm not just a quiet guy who gardens and builds fences on weekends. I'm a former county property assessor and currently work as a land use consultant. I've written the language in zoning codes people like Karen abuse. I've also trained enforcement officers how to interpret those codes and how not to get fooled by theatrics. So while she was busy making her false report, I pulled up my documentation folder. Permit, survey, HOA covenant exceptions clause. Signed letter from the city engineer. I even had body cam footage from the day the inspector signed off on the final post hole. When the sheriff's cruiser pulled up 5 minutes later, I was ready. Deputy Wallace stepped out. We knew each other'd reviewed a plat case I'd helped mediate last year. His face said it all as Karen stormed toward him with her arms flailing like angry spaghetti noodles. "She's trespassing," I said simply, offering the folder. "All documents are current, legal, and signed. The fence is exactly 21 inches inside my property line. The only thing illegal here is her standing on the wrong side of it." Karen's expression went from smug to stunned to straight up possessed. "Don't listen to him. He threatened me. He said he'd shove my clipboard." "I never said that," I interrupted. "But I did ask her 3 times to step off my property. I have doorbell cam footage and motion alert screenshots to back that up." Wallace turned to Karen. "Ma'am, did you cross through the gate or climb over the fence?" She blinked. "Well, the latch was just open. It's not locked." He tilted his head. "And did the homeowner invite you inside?" "I don't need an invitation," she snapped. "I'm the HOA liaison for this cul-de-sac. This land is under community regulation." Wallace raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, that's not how property law works." She started to protest again, but he held up a hand. "Let's do this the right way. Mr. Reed, can I see the video?" Pulled it up. 30 minutes prior. Karen opening my gate without knocking, walking in, inspecting the fence with a tape measure, then calling 911 from my rose bed. It was textbook trespassing and harassment. Wallace exhaled. "All right, that's enough. Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for criminal trespass and misuse of emergency services. You have the right to remain silent." I wish I could say Karen went quietly, but of course not. She shrieked as the cuffs clicked. "This is police overreach. I pay your salary. I am the neighborhood authority." The neighbors had come out by then. Phones were out. Some people gasped. Others clapped. One guy Mark from 3 doors down whistled like he was watching the Super Bowl halftime show. Karen was marched out of my yard, screaming about lawsuits, lawyers, and defamation of character. But the only thing being defamed was her sense of entitlement. That evening, I sat on my porch sipping tea, watching the sun fall behind the freshly painted fence. It had been a long battle, 3 months of paperwork, meetings, and non-stop surveillance alerts. But justice had finally landed in the form of 2 cold steel bracelets and a ride in the back of a squad car. And yet I wasn't even mad, just exhausted, because behind the drama was something bigger, something that needed to be told. The next morning, my inbox blew up. A neighbor had uploaded the arrest footage to the local neighborhood app. It hit 2,000 views in under 6 hours and spilled over to Reddit by lunchtime. By dinner time, FenceGate was trending on a subreddit called r/entitled people, with titles like Karen breaks onto property to complain about fence gets arrested instead. Comments poured in. Some were hilarious, some heartwarming, but most were just angry at the idea that someone like Karen could use authority as a weapon and expect to walk away clean. What she didn't count on was that the truth was already on my side, and now the public was too. 3 days later, I got a knock on the door. It was Deputy Wallace again, this time accompanied by a city code enforcement officer and a civil investigator. They were gathering additional evidence. Turns out Karen had filed over 70 complaints against homeowners in the last 2 years. 70. For everything from wind chimes to mailbox colors. And she'd personally altered at least a dozen HOA notices to inflate penalties and intimidate compliance. That's when the bigger picture came into focus. Karen hadn't just trespassed. She'd built a little empire of fear under the guise of community order. She'd created false rules, threatened non-compliant neighbors with legal action, and called the cops more times than some precincts file reports in a month. A few neighbors came forward saying she'd even entered their yards without permission, snapping photos of backyard swings, fire pits, and garden lights, then using them in anonymous complaints that led to urgent board reviews. But she was the board. That board wasn't real. She had recruited 3 friends to pose as a formal HOA committee. No elections, no public meetings, no formal filings, no county record. They were simply a group of power-hungry neighbors using fear to enforce their own version of suburbia. And now it was unraveling. The county DA called me 2 weeks later. Karen's trespassing charge had expanded into a full investigation of HOA fraud, harassment, and falsified enforcement. The case had officially gone from nuisance to criminal. And just when I thought it was over, the twist came. Karen sued me. Yep. From jail, she filed a civil suit claiming emotional damages, reputational destruction, and malicious entrapment. She said I'd humiliated her on purpose and weaponized social media to instigate vigilante justice. It was almost impressive, the level of denial. But I didn't flinch, because the moment I received the suit, I knew what to do. I countersued for defamation, for harassment, for property damage, for stress, for wasted legal costs. And most importantly, I added a claim for community restitution. I wasn't just fighting for me anymore, I was fighting for every neighbor she'd steamrolled. Court day came. It was standing room only in the county courthouse. Local press showed up. So did a few HOA experts. Karen entered in a beige blazer 2 sizes too small, lips pursed like she was still in charge. Her lawyer looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. My attorney stood tall and calm, laid out the facts. Trespassing caught on camera, false 911 call, the pattern of fabricated complaints, and the fake HOA board that didn't meet a single legal requirement. Then we showed the footage, Karen walking through the unlocked gate, brushing past the private property sign like it was invisible, phone in hand, ready to lie. She looked away, couldn't even face it. And then something incredible happened. Celestine, neighbor across the street, quiet, never involved in drama, stood up during testimony. She told the court how Karen had fined her for excessive hummingbird feeders, how she'd cried after getting a $500 sanitation violation, for letting her autistic son leave chalk drawings on the sidewalk. She choked back tears and said, She made me feel like a criminal, like my family didn't belong here. Then Mr. Patel, a retired math teacher, shared how Karen threatened to have his garden dug up for unauthorized herb cultivation. Rosemary. The crime was rosemary. More and more neighbors stood up. Their words weren't rehearsed or angry. They were real and raw. One by one, they painted the picture the court needed to see. A woman who built a throne out of fear and forgot that people talk, people remember, and people fight back when they're pushed too far. The judge took 15 minutes. Karen lost. Her civil suit was dismissed with prejudice. My countersuit was upheld in full. She was ordered to pay damages, legal costs, and a formal public apology to every neighbor who testified. She wept when the judge read the ruling, not because she was sorry, but because she finally realized the game was over. The real sentence came from the community itself. The fake HOA was dismantled by county order. A real neighborhood committee was formed, voted in by actual residents, bound by transparency and law. I wasn't interested in being on the board, but they asked me to write the new charter. I said yes. This time, no more fake rules. No more fear. Just neighbors helping neighbors. We started hosting monthly porch nights, rotating yards, music, lemonade, sometimes a grill going in the background. People brought their kids. Celeste's son drew a chalk dragon on my driveway last week. I left it up for days. And the fence? Still standing. I hung a little plaque on it. Reads, "Boundaries matter. So does kindness." Karen served 6 months under house arrest, followed by community service. She was required to take mediation and civics classes. She now lives alone, on the far edge of town, where no HOA exists. Sometimes people ask if I ever saw her again. Once, she drove by slow one afternoon, windows up, gaze hidden behind oversized sunglasses. I didn't wave. I didn't nod. Just stood with my hand on the post she once tried to tear down, watching as her car vanished into a life she could no longer control. And you know something? I didn't feel anger. I felt relief. Because sometimes the real victory isn't in watching someone fall, it's in seeing everyone else rise. So now I ask you, was Karen's downfall justified? Or did the community go too far? Your voice matters. Just like your fence line. Let it be heard.